Thank you very much. Welcome to Cats and Dogs here on Press TV with me, Lembit Öpik. Let's start with political animals in America. These days, United States politics looks a bit like some bizarre sort of zoo where the elephants, now that's the symbol of the Republican Party, are getting stampeded by the Democrat donkeys. And yes, that really is the symbol for them. And those mules are apparently trampling the elephants almost to extinction. The situation's got so bad that the elephants have been forced to reach out to the donkeys for survival.
I think if Americans would love their neighbor like they would like to be loved themselves, a lot of the division in our society would end.
That's what this means. It's a new beginning. And everybody needs to get off their high horse and reach out to their friends and neighbors and try to make it possible.
If, in fact, as George said, we're looking for what binds us together.
This could bankrupt the Republican Party, at least morally. And that's not their only problem. Looking ahead to the 2024 presidential election, if Trump, now impeached for the second time, actually gets convicted by the Senate, the Republicans may struggle to find another celebrity candidate. So what is Plan B? How about Kim Kardashian? Or Clint Eastwood, who at the age of 90 is actually regarded as 100 years too young to stand against Biden. And anyway, a man's got to know his limitations. Or failing those two, what about Plan C, namely D-list celebrity Dan Bilzerian? Ever heard of him? He got famous for getting infamous on something called Instagram, which is social media for people who prefer pictures instead of words. A system some regard as so superficial, it makes twittering Trump look like an intellectual. Incidentally, my spell check wanted to change Bilzerian to ballerina, which is highly ironic if you ask me. I bet the media want Kardashian. Eastwood's too smart to wreck his reputation by going for absolute power. And as for Bilzerian, he's too much like a European. How, you ask? Well, because Gambling Dan's nearly gone bust, like Greece. He keeps committing faux pas, which is a French phrase, and he's made almost as many enemies as post-Brexit Britain, which adds up to 450 million people. The Republicans couldn't accept that Desperate Don's presidential victory hopes were drifting away, roughly midway through the campaign. On the eve of the election, Trump's advisor Harlan Hill even vowed to eat his shoe if Biden won. Now he's reportedly too shocked to eat anything, including his shoes. Not even a flip-flop. Well, if breaking promises is so easy, then I'll commit here on Cats and Dogs to eat my own tie if Mr. Biden manages to put his pen in his pocket successfully, even just once.
My pen over here.
After the electoral dust settled on the chaos, voting software company Smartmatic filed a $2.7 billion lawsuit against various entities, such as Trump's personal lawyer, Rudy Giuliani, who repeatedly claimed, falsely, that there was widespread fraud and manipulation of voting machines. The rumour was basically that the Smartmatic software was so smart it could even count the votes of the dead. That's another one for Biden. In which case they could do away with voting altogether and decide the next election with Mystic Meg and a Ouija board. Who's going to sue Trump next? Remember the story that captured the presidential imagination that a truck driver on contract with the Postal Service had delivered many thousands of illegal ballot papers to Pennsylvania from a depot on Long Island? They could sue. At this rate, even President Erdogan in Istanbul could end up filing a lawsuit against Trump for eating turkey at Thanksgiving. Let's not rake up the past too much, though. Let's focus on the new president and his signature festival at the Oval Office.
Here relates to COVID, and It's requiring, as I said all along, where I have authority, mandating masks be worn, social distancing be kept on federal property, on interstate commerce, etc. So this is the first one I'm signing.
I first thought Biden was signing his autobiography entitled A History of Incompetence, My First 200 Years in Politics. But then I realized he was in fact draining the swamp of an administration which itself had been draining the swamp of its predecessors. That's got to be one deep swamp. American political activism is like a lazy computer keyboard user who can only be bothered to press copy and paste all the time. No new programs or other keys, and no attempt to press the escape key to exit the Middle East. Just copy and paste, and that's it. Well, okay, Biden has done a couple of new things, like having a sign language interpreter in the White House.
The addition of a sign language interpreter to the White House press briefings was hailed as groundbreaking.
Starting today, we will have an ASL, an American Sign Language interpreter, for our daily press briefings.
That's worthy, but it won't save the USA from economic and international problems. Just because Right On Joe figured when no one can make sense of what he's saying, sign language might help.
I'll lead an effective strategy to mobilize true international effort to pressure. Mobilize true international effort to pressure.
Has sign language been introduced because the new president himself goes selectively deaf when it comes to telling him America withdrew from the Iran nuclear deal? One major Biden rule is that it's obligatory to wear face masks in government offices, thanks to executive orders signed by the new president. So that's what he's been signing. Orders like, now wash your hands, signed. Now keep your distance, signed. Don't throw parties, signed. Try to remember who you're standing against. Actually, he didn't sign that one because then he'd have had to impeach himself. Aside from this signing fest, Biden has promised to end the war in Yemen. Now that's good, since that way he'll have more time to concentrate on a real war worth fighting. Biden slammed Trump for helping the Saudis waste time fighting a country in bad shape and in desperate poverty. I mean, let's face it, there's no point in invading a country that poor because they haven't even got oil. So it's time to zero in on the Far East. Oh, sharks of the South China Sea, prepare to swim under the battleships of the US Navy. Just weeks into Biden's presidency, it's already become quite clear allegations that he was pro-socialism have some truth to them. He signed an executive order banning federal contracts with private prison companies. Why? Well, he's learned a lesson from Trump on this one. By nationalizing prisons, Biden can still visit his key people if they end up behind bars. That's so much faster than pardoning everybody all the time, like Don did. And he'll also always know where to find them. Loads of private money was pumped into Biden's campaign. What do I mean by private? Well, whether they were bribes from Wall Street or an affiliate of Al-Nusra Front in Chechen, it's all a private matter. While we don't know where all those dollars came from, Biden revealed where some of them were spent. This presidential man of the people wore a $7,000 Rolex watch, which caused a stir on Inauguration Day. Mr. Biden showed that as the leader of the free world, he can wear any timepiece he wants, even one worth over twice the average annual salary in Vietnam. So they may have lost that crazy Asian war, but at least no one in Vietnam can afford to tell the time like he can. So relax, or was it Rolex? Now let's have a look at the good, the bad, and the ugly for this week. The good this week are Danish scientists who plan to build a huge artificial island in the North Sea as a major renewable energy hub. Its capacity could power 10 million homes without suffocating the earth with pollution. except of course when it's not windy. Perhaps on the quiet days those wacky Danes will use the island for mink farming. But since when was pouring 1 billion tons of concrete into the sea safe? It could cause a splash so big it could flood the rest of Denmark. Get with it, guys. This week's bad are Israeli forces who destroyed a Bedouin village for the second time in 3 months, leaving several families homeless. Tented homes and animal shelters in the village of Khirbet Humsa were last ruined in November, meaning you can't get many travelling insurance salesmen visiting there anymore. Some compare Israeli domestic policy to a decades-old pandemic for which no one has yet managed to develop a vaccine. And finally, the ugly this week is another Israeli, Cabinet Minister Tzachi Hanegbi, who recently hinted at a unilateral Israeli military strike against Iran if Biden signed up for a new nuclear deal that failed to meet Israeli concerns. Why the settlement minister should make such a warning is strange enough. But maybe he should instead be focusing on attracting a building supply supermarket for that Bedouin village of Khirbet Humsa, so they can rebuild their homes fast enough to be ready for the next time those irrepressible Israeli bulldozers bash their buildings down, like they do every 3 months. That's it for this time. Join me again to find out who's shooting at who's suing who, and who's new at the zoo. I'm Lembit Öpik, this is Press TV, and that was Cats and Dogs.